Welcome to a deep dive into the world of high output management. We're cracking open Andy Grove's High Output Management, a classic guide from the former CEO of Intel, a true Silicon Valley legend.
Definitely a legend.
Get ready, because this isn't just for tech folks. Grove's wisdom applies to pretty much any field you can think of.
Yeah, it's true. His principles for maximizing productivity and effectiveness can help you whether you're leading a team or managing projects, or just trying to conquer your own to-do list.
Okay, let's jump right in. One of the coolest things Grove does is he uses this analogy of a breakfast factory to explain how work gets done.
It does sound a little strange at first, but it's incredibly insightful. He basically says you can think of any work as a production process, just like making breakfast.
So I'm guessing that means my morning coffee is the output,
Mm.
and I'm the factory worker.
Exactly. You've got your inputs, the coffee beans, water filters, and your desired output, that perfect cup of coffee. And in between, you've got a process with different stages.
Yeah.
Grinding the beans, heating the water, brewing the coffee.
So even something as simple as making coffee has a workflow that can be optimized. Mind blown. But how does this apply to, say, managing a team or launching a new product?
Grove's point is that every work process, no matter how complex, can be broken down into these fundamental elements. There are always inputs, outputs, and stages in between. And by understanding this, you can start to identify bottlenecks and improve efficiency.
Give me an example. How does a breakfast factory thinking help in a real work situation?
Okay, so let's say you're managing a software development team. Your inputs are the ideas, the code, the designer's work. The output is a functioning piece of software. And the stages in between involve things like writing code, testing, debugging, and so on. But if one stage is much slower than the others, maybe testing is taking forever, it creates a bottleneck that throws off the entire process.
That's so true. It's like waiting forever for the toaster to finish while your eggs get cold. And just like in the breakfast analogy, you need to figure out how to speed up that bottleneck to get the whole system flowing smoothly. This is making me rethink my entire morning routine, not to mention my work projects.
That's the beauty of Grove's approach. It gives you a framework for analyzing any work process and finding ways to improve it.
Now you've got your breakfast factory humming. But how do you know it's truly efficient? Grove is big on using data to manage, right?
Absolutely. He calls them indicators. And they're basically clear, measurable metrics that help you track progress, identify problems, and make better decisions.
Okay, so let's put on our manager hats. We're back at the breakfast factory, but now we're in charge. What are the key indicators we should be tracking every day?
Well, first you'd want to know your sales forecast. How many breakfasts do you expect to sell today? Then you compare that to your actual sales from yesterday. This gives you the variance from the plan, showing how accurate your predictions are.
Makes sense. So you can see if you're consistently overestimating or underestimating demand and adjust accordingly. What else should a savvy breakfast factory manager be keeping an eye on?
You definitely want to monitor your raw material inventory. Do you have enough eggs, bacon, and coffee to meet the demand? If you run out of a key ingredient, your whole production process grinds to a halt.
Oh, that's a nightmare scenario. Nobody wants a breakfast riot on their hands because they ran out of coffee.
No.
What about things like equipment breakdowns? Those can be major bottlenecks, too.
Absolutely. You'd track machine downtime. How often your toaster is breaking down, for instance. That tells you if you need to invest in repairs or even replace it altogether.
It's like he's saying, don't just wing it. Use data to make smart decisions. This sounds like something every manager should be doing, regardless of their industry. But Grove doesn't stop there. He talks about using paired indicators, looking at two related metrics together, right?
Exactly. It's not just about looking at one number in isolation, but understanding the context. Let's say you're running a restaurant, and your customer satisfaction ratings are through the roof, but your sales are declining. That tells you something very different than if both were high, or if both were low.
Ooh, that's a good point. High satisfaction doesn't always translate to success if you're not attracting enough customers. I can see how this applies to so many things.
Grove even argues that indicators can be applied to administrative tasks, which are often seen as less quantifiable. You can track things like how long it takes to process invoices or respond to emails, giving you insights into areas for improvement.
Okay, so we've got the basics of production down. We're tracking our indicators like pros.
Mhm.
But what about the role of the manager in all of this? This is where Grove's idea of managerial leverage comes in, right?
That's right. Grove says a manager's output isn't about their individual tasks, but about the output of their team. They need to focus on activities that have the biggest impact on the team's performance.
So it's not about just being busy all day,
Yeah.
but being strategically busy. I'm guessing this is where knowing your indicators comes in handy.
Absolutely. You need to understand what's driving your team's performance and then focus your efforts on the areas that will have the greatest leverage.
Okay, I'm ready to get my leverage on. But how does a manager actually do this? What does a high leverage day look like?
Grove actually shares insights from his own workday diary, which is fascinating. He spends a lot of time gathering information, talking to people inside and outside the company, attending meetings, reading reports, and really getting a pulse on what's happening.
So it's less about doing and more about understanding, almost like being a detective, gathering clues to figure out where to focus your energy.
That's a great analogy. He sees information gathering as the foundation of effective management. He even says, if you don't know what you want, you won't get it.
I love that. It's so simple, yet so profound. You can't lead effectively if you're operating in the dark.
And he's not just passively absorbing information, he's actively using it to nudge others in the right direction. He might make a phone call, send a note, or make a comment in a meeting to subtly influence a decision.
It's about leadership through influence rather than command and control right. But this takes us to another key aspect of Grove's approach, delegation. He has some pretty interesting ideas about how to delegate effectively.
He does. And some of his advice might surprise you. He actually believes that you should delegate the things you know best.
Wait, really? That seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't you want to delegate the tasks you don't know as well, so someone with more expertise can handle them?
That's what most people think. But Grove argues that by delegating what you're good at, you're better equipped to guide and support the person doing the work. You can provide clearer instructions, anticipate potential problems, and offer more valuable feedback.
That makes sense when you put it that way. It's about setting people up for success, not just throwing tasks over the fence and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And he stresses that delegation isn't about abdicating responsibility. You're still accountable for the outcome, even if someone else is doing the work. So you need to monitor progress, provide support, and ensure things are on track.
Delegation done right. Okay, now let's talk about something that often gets a bad rap, meetings. But Grove actually sees them as a crucial part of managerial work, right?
He does. He believes that meetings, when done well, are the primary way managers get things done. He even makes a distinction between process-oriented meetings and mission-oriented meetings.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference?
Process-oriented meetings happen regularly and are focused on information sharing, teaching, and feedback. Think of things like weekly team check-ins or one-on-ones with your direct reports.
So they're about keeping everyone on the same page, providing support and course correcting as needed. And what about mission-oriented meetings?
Those are more about tackling a specific problem or making a decision. They might be called to address a crisis, brainstorm a new product idea, or decide on a strategic direction.
So they're more focused and outcome-driven, with a clear goal in mind. Now, within process-oriented meetings, Grove highlights three key types: one-on-one staff meetings and operation reviews. Let's start with one-on-ones. Those seem pretty straightforward. A manager and a direct report sitting down to talk. What's so special about them?
Well, Grove believes they are essential for building strong relationships and ensuring open communication between a manager and their team members. He emphasizes using them for mutual teaching and information exchange, not just a top-down lecture.
So it's a chance for both the manager and the employee to learn from each other. That's a cool way to think about it.
He even shares some tactical advice for making them more effective. He suggests having a structured outline to guide the conversation, taking notes and setting the next meeting as this one ends.
Ooh, those are some great tips, especially that last one. It keeps things from falling through the cracks. And I love his ask one more question technique.
Oh yeah, it's a great way to encourage deeper thinking and get to the root of an issue. Instead of just accepting surface-level answers, you keep digging until you really understand what's going on.
And what about staff meetings? How does Grove approach those? They sometimes have a reputation for being unproductive and a waste of time.
He sees them as opportunities for team-wide communication and coordination. But he stresses the importance of having a clear purpose for the meeting and establishing clear roles and expectations for each participant.
So it's not just a random gathering where everyone chimes in, but a more structured approach with a defined agenda. This is making me rethink how I run my team meetings. What about operation reviews? What are those all about?
Operation reviews are meetings where different teams come together to share updates on their work and learn from each other. It's a chance to get a glimpse into other parts of the organization and see how everything fits together.
It's like breaking down those silos and fostering cross-team communication and learning.
Exactly. Grove suggests using formal presentations, encouraging questions and feedback, and making sure everyone has a chance to contribute.
I like that. It turns a potentially boring report-out session into a more engaging and insightful discussion. He also mentions the importance of having a senior manager present at these meetings, right?
He does. He says that having someone with more experience and authority present helps set the tone for a productive discussion. They can ask insightful questions, provide feedback, and ensure that the meeting stays on track and achieves its objectives.
So it's not just about reporting numbers, but about fostering a culture of learning and continuous improvement.
Exactly. By bringing teams together and encouraging open dialogue, you create an environment where everyone can learn from each other's successes and challenges. And that's a key ingredient for high output management. You know, all this talk about information flow and open communication makes me talk about decision making. It's one thing to gather information, but how do you actually make good decisions, especially in today's knowledge-based world?
That's a great point. It's not always easy to translate information into action. So how does Grove approach decision-making?
He's got some really insightful thoughts on this. He points out that as companies grow and technology evolves, the people with the most knowledge about a particular issue aren't always the ones in positions of power.
It's that classic disconnect between the folks on the front lines who are deep in the details and the executives making the big calls.
Exactly. And Grove believes the ideal decision-making process needs to bridge that gap. He advocates for open discussion and debate, even if it gets a little heated at times. Everyone should feel comfortable sharing their knowledge and perspectives freely, regardless of their position.
So it's about embracing diverse viewpoints, even those that challenge the status quo. But doesn't that risk creating chaos and indecision?
It's a valid concern, but Grove also emphasizes the importance of reaching a clear decision, even when there's disagreement. He stresses that everyone needs to understand the decision and buy into it, even if they don't completely agree.
That makes sense. Otherwise, you end up with half-hearted implementation
Yeah.
and people working at cross purposes.
Yeah.
But how do you get everyone on board when there are strong opinions on all sides?
Grove believes in transparency and clear communication. Once a decision is made, it needs to be communicated clearly, and everyone needs to understand the rationale behind it. This allows people to process the decision, ask questions, and ultimately align themselves with the chosen path.
It's about building consensus and moving forward as a united team, even if there were initial disagreements. This reminds me of something else Grove cautions against, which he calls peer group syndrome.
Mm.
What's that all about?
It's that tendency to go along to get along, especially in meetings. People are afraid to speak up and disagree with their peers or superiors for fear of rocking the boat or looking foolish.
I've definitely seen that happen.
Yeah.
You get a room full of smart people, but nobody wants to challenge the prevailing opinion.
Right. And Grove argues that this can stifle creativity and lead to suboptimal decisions. He encourages everyone to contribute their knowledge and insights, even if it means going against the grain.
So speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. I like that. But this all sounds very theoretical. Did Grove actually use this approach in real-life situations?
He did. He shares an example of a complex decision he faced at Intel. Whether to build a new plant in the Philippines, they considered all the factors: cost, logistics, future demand, and had a rigorous debate before reaching a decision. It wasn't easy. But by fostering open communication and considering diverse viewpoints, they arrived at a solution that was ultimately the best for the company.
Okay, so we've made a decision, everyone's on board. Now what? How do we ensure that we actually execute on our plans and achieve the desired outcomes? I know Grove is a big believer in planning, right?
He is. He sees planning as an essential activity for driving future output. He lays out a simple yet powerful framework for planning, starting with understanding the projected need or demand.
What will your customers or the market require in the future?
It's about anticipating what's coming down the pike and preparing for it. Like if you're running an ice cream shop, you better stock up on extra inventory before summer hits.